What up, guys? What's going on? What's going on? Today was, I'm not even gonna lie, today was a shitty kind of day. I mean, they kind of stuck us in a box for most of the day until they ended up slowly just pulling the rug. And that was kind of just disgusting how they ended up doing it in the fashion that they did it. And then kind of just seeing how you saw some relative strength in some names, and then you just saw the rug pull at the same time with the broader market. That was kind of disgusting how they ended up doing that. They literally finessed a lot of people, I'm sure, today. But what's going on, Lobo? What's going on, Randy? You basically saw Tesla pretty much show that relative strength. You saw Netflix, that was a random shit that ended up coming out. I think that whoever came out with that upgrade this morning, they finessed some bullshit out of that because that popped and it literally just went, continue to keep going with the broader market just going down. So that was a hell of a bullshit upgrade that came at what an opportune time. I mean, a hell of a timing on that for that to end up coming out. But that was one that had the relative strength, and then Boeing was also on my watch list pretty much earlier on. I think I was pretty much looking for that to pop over 151 and some change. You had about a $2 opportunity on that. So that was a beautiful one that I was kind of watching here, just going off of levels. So that was one on my radar. But what I'm basically looking at, we do have quad witching tomorrow, so that's gonna be some BS that we're likely gonna see. But typically, that's usually within power hour. Usually, typically like the last few minutes. More so that I end up seeing pretty much that kind of BS going on. But it usually sometimes ends up starting as early as say around lunchtime, around that 1 to 2 o'clock Eastern time. So I would be cautious about that. That's pretty much the biggest thing I would say. Now I will say that what pretty much I'm looking at right now, obviously you see the megaphone within the megaphone. That kind of is the illustration right now. But what I've actually seen is that after we had that major leg down off of CPI data, all of this basically felt like it was a little bit of a distribution in which you saw selling take place and you saw the broader market give you that little rug pull today. But now, what I'm looking at going into tomorrow now is you see the little greatest shaded area down towards the bottom. That was ideally my demand zone that I was watching. And I came on live yesterday and I talked about that demand zone that I was looking at dating back towards the beginning of September here. That we ended up having that we either teetered right around that 39.19 down as low as 39.14 level as pretty much like a little bit of a pivot off of support and then recovering that basically started that rally we had dating back to March to September 7th. So we ended up hitting a demand zone. We actually wicked the bottom trend line supported in this little miniature megaphone. Tomorrow, I'm looking for pretty much a squeeze on the back end of this. We've had a lot of oversold, pretty much. Microsoft, Apple, they literally started the bleeding from the get-go this morning, and so I would expect that we see a little bit of a relief. I'm not talking about the fact that we end up seeing this probably beyond tomorrow. I'm just specifically talking about tomorrow. I would expect some relief on the back end of how much X amount of drop we've had percentage wise we've had thus far this week. I think that the market's going to try to pierce some of these losses that we've given off of that CPI dump, and we're going to see some kind of rally on the back end with that kind of bullshit headline, market pairs losses or whatever the case may be. All right, so I'm gonna look for pretty much a reversal here. Watching key levels for this reversal to take place is over 39.40. Continuation of that takes place over 39.83, and then I'm going to be targeting my demand zone that I have sitting up here between 40.18 and as high as 40.30 is what I'm looking at potentially for my supply zone. All right. So again, 39.40, 39.83, and then we can get as high as 40.30 tomorrow, depending on how strong of a rally we get off of this little reversal I expect. All right. So those are the key levels to the upside. Now, of course, always playing devil's advocate and pretty much, looking at both sides. Now, if we end up taking out today's low below this 39.18, downside I'm watching is 38.84 and then 38.57, which we can stretch down towards even as low as I want to say roughly around 38.36 is what I'm watching for this pretty much this downtrend support off of the larger degree megaphone. All right. So those are pretty much the key levels I'm watching here. But again, I mean, I'm in favor of the fact that we're going to get a squeeze. We defended that downtrend support off of the miniature megaphone that I have. And it does seem that we have a date dating towards that 4,000 mark. A little bit over that, that will get a little bit of extension north of it. And my gut feeling is that then we get the rollover. We see more blood coming next week. All right. So I wouldn't say going out next to holding over the weekend. I think no. Obviously I'm not gonna be on live tomorrow to tell you guys that for YouTube, but I would not look to hold calls over the weekend. I would pretty much caution about that. But once we get up to that, no, close enough to that 40-30 level, that's where I would expect the bleeding to pretty much resume, and we should get a follow through off of that CPI dump. All right. So that's what I'm looking at for futures. Now I'm gonna get into a few names that kind of just cross my territory in terms of some setups that I actually did like. I'll start with one that actually took my attention. First one was Walmart. I'm pretty sure Lobo, you might like this one. This was a pretty nice sort of head and shoulders action that I'm watching off of Walmart here. You could basically see the left shoulder, the head, and then we curled just recently to form that right shoulder. So you're sitting right near the neckline of this head and shoulders action right now. Now, if we do end up getting a bounce tomorrow, I'm going to look to pretty much take this back as high as 135. So you do have a potential for an upside here. If we do get any kind of miniature bounce, I would watch for this to retrace as high as 135. And this may end up being an opportunity that I look for in terms of going vice versa, in terms of expecting a short lived bounce tomorrow and then further blood going into next week. I may end up looking at this one for a potential short around that 135 mark if we do get the bounce. So that may be one that's pretty much going to catch my attention tomorrow. But either way, you can end up playing the move up towards 135, or you can end up taking an entry on puts at 135. So I like this one a lot. Downside I'm potentially watching for is as low as 128 here. Reason I'm looking at 128, if I kind of zoom out, I'll probably get out to the 4 hour here to give you a little bit of a zoom out. You can basically see we've actually that was where we ended up getting that second degree gap down that we had dating back to May 18th. You ended up dropping right down towards that 128 level. That was the same exact level you retested. You hit a little bit of supply, rejected, had the leg down. Again, another level where you had a reversal, and you got a key break over that 128 mark. So you've teetered that 128 very consistently the past, I want to say, few months here. And that was the key level that I'm expecting off of this head and shoulders. Once we get this breakdown here to take place under this 132 mark, I would expect this to pretty much continue it and escalate down towards 128. So keep this one pretty much on watch tomorrow. It can retrace as high as 135 for the upside here if it does go with the broader market bounce. But at that 135 level, I think that's the ultimate entry in terms of risk reward to getting into a short here. And then you could take that right down to 128. All right. So that's pretty much one on my radar out of the five that I have. The other one, of course, is a name we're all familiar with is Tesla. Pretty much watching this one. We have a nice little top broadening wedge type of action going on. You saw the relative strength the past, I want to say 2 3 days out of this one. The other thing that stood out was the fact that I actually anticipated going into today, and I think I mentioned that yesterday, is that we had such a drastic move on this one going to the upside yesterday. I expected it to give us some kind of price action similar to what Apple did. If you guys remember, Monday we had a $6 move to the upside in Apple, and then it followed it up with about a $10 move out to the downside off of CPI. So I was expecting downside on this one, but that is some hell of a relative strength that we're showing off for this one. So I'm gonna watch for this. As long as it holds that 299 level, I think we can make another push up tomorrow, especially if the broader market is gonna be making some kind of reversal and we kind of hold up. I would expect this to push as high as 314 here. That's where I actually have my supply currently sitting. If I kind of zoom out, probably see it off of the daily more so. See if we zoom out to the daily. Yeah, the daily kind of gives you a little bit of a better image here. You can basically see where you've had prior breakdown, prior resistance levels dating back to what is this? The beginning of the year, January 21st, resistance you retested, beginning of February, you had your breakdowns, your reversals and breakouts, and then you had a nice little retest of resistance at that May 14th date. So I would expect we kind of get a little bit of a move up towards 314 if the market's going to allow it. I would not be surprised if this ends up getting as high as that level. So this is one I would keep on radar. If we already had a $10 move, what was it yesterday on this? It would not surprise me for this to make another $10 move to the upside yet again tomorrow if the market does allow it. So that's one that I would probably keep on watch here tomorrow. May actually have the most upside potential in terms of big cap tech. So that's one to just have on the radar. But of course, as long as it holds 299, you want to see the break back over roughly this over this 305 mark that has been teetering as a resistance for these past few days. And then over the 305 mark, you're going to watch a little bit of resistance at 309 half. And then that'll be pretty much your extension to make its full on move up to 314. So I like Tesla here. I'll keep that one on the radar as well. Third one on the watch list is Roku. Roku's been one that I haven't watched relatively. I want to say in recent time, past few weeks at least, for the most part. But it had the relative strength today. I think that was something that stood out to me. That was, for a day that we ended up having, and with all the blood around the markets, that was quite interesting. But you have a nice little inverted head and shoulders action playing out here. You got the convincing break over the neckline today with massive 2 hour candle that's present there. And you're also pretty much seeing the little retrace back down towards the neckline as a support test. So as long as this ends up holding that 72 mark, I would anticipate 72 is going to be your entry for calls on this one. And this should take another leg up as you have a nice gap fill sitting here above this 77.15, and it'll complete at basically 77.5. So from 72 up to 77, that's about another $5 move to the upside potentially. It could basically replicate today's price action. I think this is one that's actually warrant pretty much consideration tomorrow. As long as it holds 72, you could take this up to 75, 77 and watch for that first gap fill to be completed. All right. So that's when I do like tomorrow. Fourth one on the watch list is actually one that pretty much someone actually mentioned out to me in chat. Was watching Snow. I think it was Mo that actually mentioned it or name dropped it in the dojo today. So it actually stood out to me. I saw a nice little ascending, broadening wedge type of action, and typically this is a bearish pattern. But what ends up happening is that you end up typically retesting the resistance before you get the drastic move to the downside. I did mention to him as well, that was actually when it was sitting at around 201. I mentioned that it was going to end up retesting support potentially down as low as 196. So I would pretty much anticipate it's going to hold this 196 level. We should pretty much reclaim and break over this recent high that we had from today. And we should get over this 203 half mark. And then this should start to make its way up. And I do have this leg being completed all the way up towards 228. So it's going to be interesting to see how and which fashion it's going to get up there, as I'm pretty much assuming the market's going to likely end up, taking a downturn towards next week. But we'll see if there's any kind of relative strength showing here. But bigger picture is I would pretty much watch as long as we can get a reversal. If you can get a move here back over 199 half, I think you can get a solid entry over that 199 half. And then you look to take out that high from today at 203 half. And then you look for the high dating back towards August 26th. That's sitting at 205 half. So it has some levels there that you could pretty much play off of that one. Pretty much intermediate going into tomorrow, I'm saying. And that has some beautiful potential. And I would watch that one going into tomorrow as well. All right. And then the last one is pretty much the bank sector. A little bit of a different area. But this one actually stands out because it does have pretty much a similar situation to Roku, an inverted head and shoulders type of action going on. You can also see a little descending broadening wedge off of the black lines here for the larger degree. So, one of my favorite patterns having a descending broadening wedge, and within that descending broadening wedge, you have an inverted head and shoulders. So I do like that setup here. I would be watching for this one. If we can get a move over 119 tomorrow, I would watch for this to pretty much make a move up towards 121. And above 121, we're looking for completion of gap fill that's sitting all the way up towards 123 half. So that could be a very pretty much intriguing one here tomorrow. If the banks could show some life, you had a nice little retest, I want to say, down at this 117 half mark today already. So I would expect a bounce back, and this one should actually see at least 120 tomorrow, 121 tomorrow at the very minimum. So I think this actually warrants consideration as well tomorrow. Let's see how it actually holds up with the broader market, and that could be definitely be in play tomorrow. All right. There, what's going on? Amazon is money today. The Head and Shoulders. I think that did end up playing out. I actually remember that I was talking about that one. That was a beautiful little setup. I think we were watching for a little Head and Shoulders action. I think I outlined yesterday. You had the nice little left shoulder. You had the head. You had the right shoulder that basically was a disgusting type of wick. And I mean, that's a disgusting wick. That ended up going up towards 130, close enough to 130 half. And then if you ended up getting in as high as that 130 half, that was a hell of a snipe if you got that entry point, and then you would have had the beautiful breakdown. So that was a beautiful one. I mean, it's already pretty much gotten its little breakdown here. It's sitting right off of that neckline that ended up reversing off of. So I would keep an eye on this one. I mean, ideally it should get a leg down, so maybe we see some early weakness out of Amazon compared to the broader market. Probably come down as low as I want to say roughly around this 124 half. We could potentially see it, and then maybe it ends up seeing a reversal off of that level. So that'll be one kind of a little bit more on the weaker side. But if you get it down to 124 half, I think that maybe it's a low ball entry to pretty much look for the reversal more so. So 124 half, I think that's probably the bigger number I would say. Otherwise, you lose 124 half, I still have a demand zone sitting down here between this 121 to 122 spot. All right. Ricky, big picture rate hike next week, SPY 380 and below, or SPY 416. What do you feel? I would say that right now I'm in the camp that we end up seeing the markets pretty much get up towards no, I'm close enough to that 400, 401 mark tomorrow, and then we should trade down towards 380. So I'm pretty much in that camp. I mean, not the 380 is kind of iffy necessarily to say exactly 380, but I would say that we get close enough to 400, 401 tomorrow. Ideally, is what I'm pretty much anticipating. Depends how strong of whatever kind of reversal and relief we get tomorrow, or if it even extends going into Monday, to say the least. But then I would anticipate that we end up taking this right back down. We'll likely flush below, pretty much the recent lows that we've had, and then I'm pretty sure roughly around the range that I'm looking at was right around 385, 384 is more so what I was looking at for our next stop to the downside. All right. So we'll get a nice bounce, probably be a day or two, depending how quickly we get up towards 400, 401 on SPY. And then we should see the next leg to the downside. All right. So that's pretty much giving you my sentiment there. Other than that, though, I kind of gave you the five watches that I have going into tomorrow. Kind of just narrowing it down in terms of just names that I want to keep on my radar. Of course, there's probably going to be some more names going into tomorrow because I'm sure some kind of BS is going to happen, kind of like how we had this morning with that whole Netflix situation. So we'll see what pretty much presents itself tomorrow. But other than that, the setups that looked more ideal, that kind of gave me that picture perfect layout were the five that I kind of just laid out there for you. All right. Ricky, yeah, just rounding number off. Yeah, there 385 gap on the 1 hour. Yeah, so that's kind of roughly where my first PT was going to the downside once we start to pretty much, take that next leg down. It's just that, pretty much looking at what I had for futures, as I'm pretty much going off of ES, is that I anticipate we get to move up. I had us going as high as, and this is speaking of futures pretty much on ES, I had us going as high as say 430, 4030, and then we should see that leg to the downside here. And off of ES, pretty much puts us down as though it's roughly around 38, 36 ish off of this little megaphone action I have sitting down to the bottom trend line support. All right. So, I mean, we'll watch for the bounce. No, but this has been pretty much an onslaught. Since we had the CPI data, I think we had one kind of flat to green day. Now we saw pretty much the red day here today. Tomorrow is likely going to be vice versa. So a little bit of a seesaw type of action we've had since that CPI data is what I'm pretty much looking at to close out the week. I still think the market's going to have some kind of crappy headline that the market's going to pierce some whatever losses off of how much the percent decline we've had thus far, and then we'll end up seeing that get a reversal right back, and the blood is going to continue to see for the downside. All right. So other than that, though, I will leave it pretty much short as it is right now. Tomorrow, just be careful with how it's going to be quad witching. Of course, after pretty much crossing into lunchtime into the end of the day, that's when you're going to see some kind of whiplash at whatever given point in time of the day. So just be cautious about that, especially if you're doing a 0 day. I think that's probably the biggest concern you have because your premiums are going to get slashed literally before you can blink. All right. So that's pretty much my warning sign for you guys. But other than that, I would also say pretty much if you're looking to pretty much stay long over the weekend, I would caution that as well. I know there's also some pretty much crypto's not looking too hot as well. I did read a lot of pretty much articles and some headlines about Bitcoin pretty much looking to pretty much basically decline. We've been teetering what that 20 to 22K mark off of Bitcoin. It does look like it's pretty much set to take another leg down as well, but it may be possible that we see a little bit of a relief with the broader market tomorrow for crypto. So that's something that's kind of just in the back of my mind as well. I expect pretty much the bonds to continue to surge. That's something that we've continually just been seeing. So that's something as well that I have my eyes on, and then watching the dollar to see at what point it's going to end up reversing back to the upside. All right. So that's just surrounding factors that I'm just keeping an eye on and watching, and basically we all should. All right. But other than that, I will leave today's segment as is. You guys have a great Friday. Have a great evening. It is Thursday night football, so get some enjoyment, relax, and you guys all have a great evening. All right. Later, guys.